As always, I see the popular seats at the front are full. Feel free to move forward if you'd like to be closer to the action, but otherwise it's great to see you all here, and I hope you enjoyed the opportunity to have a bit of a conversation with one another and perhaps with a PC teacher or the head of year while you were having a drink out the front. Of course, if you didn't get that opportunity, PC teachers and the head of year will be here at the end of the presentation, which we think will be over in just about an hour. So I'm not going to delay that any further, but I'm just going to offer an apology on behalf of Mr. Innes Hill, our principal. He's currently at a meeting in Brisbane, so he asked me to tender his apologies for his absence this evening. But were he here, he would say that a really important ingredient in our student success is the relationship between college and home, and the fact that you're here tonight in person, not on a link but here in person, is a clear evidence to us and obviously to your children of your commitment to them and your preparedness to work with us to get the best outcome possible for our students and your children. So thank you and welcome. All right, I'm going to hand to Mr. Seymour, who's going to introduce the Year 11 PC teachers, I'm sure. So I think we've got them all seated at the front. And from there, you'll be hearing from Mr. Manson and Mr. Campbell. So, with no further delays, please make Mr. Seymour welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Heaney. And I'd just like to reiterate that it was lovely to see everyone and have a chat to some of you in the foyer there. I must say I'm rather jealous seeing everyone sitting there with a nice cold beer in their hand. It's a very civilized way of having one of these evenings. So I'm the head of Year 11, and I'll be looking after your child over the course of the next year. I've been doing the job for now, I think, close on 8 years. So I've seen a few people come through the doors, and I've got to say that this current year group has made a particularly good start to the year. So I'm really hoping that we continue that good start. And you know, my presentation this evening is going to be about what we do as a PC group, a pastoral care group, to support your child. I'm going to end with some tips. I'm going to speak about what we're doing in the personal development area, and just generally give you a rundown of some of the things that are happening in the year. And then Mr. Manson's going to speak to you about some other teaching and learning things, and then it's going to be followed on by Mr. Campbell. So let's get cracking. So the pastoral care team, my team of PC teachers, they're essentially the first port of call. The students come in at the beginning of the day, and the first teacher they interact with on most occasions will be their PC teacher. The PC teacher takes the roll call, reads out notices, checks that everything is as it should be. They're meant to be like a really supportive teacher who, if your child has any issues or any concerns or questions, they're the first place to go to. The same with you. If you want to make contact and send an email if you've got a little question, please feel free to email them, and they will respond as soon as they can. The other important thing that they do there is, that last bullet point you'll see, is to remove any barriers to learning. So we follow the raised responsibility system. And essentially, the system is designed to ensure that the students develop the ability to redirect themselves. It encourages students to take responsibility for their own learning. And there's a step-by-step process that we use to ensure that. The first step is, if there's a little bit of distractedness in the classroom or something's happening within the student's learning that isn't quite as it should be, the teachers have been instructed to use a range of questions to help redirect the student within the classroom. If there's no response, or we don't get the desired response, the next step up from that is what we call a written reflection, where the student is asked to sit down and think a little bit more carefully about his or her actions and how they've impacted on their learning. The important step for that written reflection is the last step, where the student, along with the form that they've filled in, have a meeting with the teacher concerned, and they discuss what's happened and discuss a way forward to avoid something like that happening in the future. So that's the process, and that's all happens at the teacher level. If there is a written reflection, it's entered into the system, and the PC teacher will be informed of that written reflection, and I'll be informed of the written reflection. The PC teachers will then maybe have a follow-up conversation about that, so that we can support the student as best we can. If there's no response after that written reflection, that's when I get involved, and I will have another conversation with the student, and we'll try and organize and work our way through what's going wrong and how we can maybe improve that. With the raised responsibility system, the focus is really on the students accepting that responsibility for themselves, their learning and their behavior. And as such, we deal with the student for the vast majority of the time. Really, we'll only be contacting home if we've reached a situation where I feel like I can't make any more ground with the student, with my working with the student, and then we need to get the parents involved. So don't be too worried if you hear something happened. Consider it that we will be working with the student, and we'll be trying to sort it out ourselves, and that you will only need to be involved if we hit a slightly larger stumbling block. It really doesn't happen very often. The students are very good at being redirected by this stage, so it's not often much of an issue. Okay, so here is where I introduce the PC teachers. So we have Miss Jamie Gonzalez of Lane House. I'm sure you all saw her in the back there. Thank you, Jamie. Then I'm not sure if Miss Terry's here. Miss Terry's up the back there. She's busy waving at us. She's running with Smith House. We have Miss Alison Beeforth working with Morris House, and then we have Mrs. Rachel Horner working with Gibbs House. Those are the people you need to contact if you have any of those questions or if you're looking for any further support. They are a very dedicated group. We work very well as a team, and I'm sure we'll be able to support your student, your child, in whatever way we can. This is where I move on to some of the head of year things. This is a job that Mr. Heaney passed down to me, so thank you, Mr. Heaney, for that. Mobile phones. So we're really proud of our mobile phone policy, and we're glad to see that the rest of the states have started to catch up with us. We've had a policy of no mobile phones in use during school for a number of years now. And we're very happy with the way it is. We have to deal with very few sort of social media issues happening in school because of that. And we like to encourage students to actually engage with one another during morning tea and lunch and not be distracted by phones. So when the students arrive at a college, they put their phone away in their locker, and they should not be accessing their phone at all during the course of the day. They're allowed to take their phone out of their locker at the end of the day, including, and this is important, including contacting home. If they need to contact home for whatever reason, they are to come to the head of year office and ask permission. And then we will either allow them to get their mobile phone out under supervision, or they can actually just use the office landline. So that's how we work there. So the students should not be sending you texts during the day. If they are doing that, then they're accessing their mobile phone when they shouldn't be. The policy is if a mobile phone is out, it will be taken from them, and you will be contacted to collect the mobile phone in the first instance. The second instance, they lose their mobile phone for a week. That usually is enough deterrent to avoid any errors in judgment. Okay, the other thing I need to speak about is unnecessary absences. And being a parent, I know from personal experience that sometimes our children try and angle for a day off. and it's sometimes quite hard to say no to them. But our position is that we really want to encourage you to ensure that your child attends college as often as possible. Now, we acknowledge that sometimes absences are unavoidable for either sickness or other things that come up. Life happens, and we accept that. What we're talking about here is absences really that have no particular reason or cause. We want to avoid those things so that each individual student has the best possibility to achieve their academic potential. And absences have a negative effect on their performance. So it is law that students attend school every day for the full day. And as such, any early departures or late arrivals are considered as an absence within the college. And by law, we are meant to follow up on any absences. So if you get a phone call from us because your child is not here, that is us following the letter of the law and contacting home and asking for some sort of explanation. Also, if you want to, you can use that as an extra motivator for your child to attend school. This following graph shows, I think quite explicitly, the impact of missing days on ATAR scores. You'll see there on the left are students who achieve 95 to 99 ATARs, and they miss on average 5.2 days in the year, whereas students who miss over 14 days generally score between 50 and 69 in their ATAR. We can't teach them if they're not here. They miss out on work that they have to catch up. They're placed under extra pressure to catch up on that work. It's a bit of a cycle, and the best thing for it is to ensure that your child comes to school as often as possible. Please, if you're having any difficulty with that, just reach out to any of us, the PC teacher or myself, and we'll do whatever we can to help support you in that. So in order to try and encourage that a little further, we are insisting that any student who wants to be considered for end-of-year awards needs to attend 95% of the year. Now, obviously, that takes into account explained absences, medical absences, and all of that. We're trying to ensure that students come as often as they can. Equally, they need to attend the house carnivals, cross-country and swimming to be eligible not only for leadership positions, but also the awards. So we're trying to, from our end, really ensure that students come to school as often as we can. Right, our aims for this year. These are some of the aims that I went through with the year group this morning. So apologies, students, if you've heard this before, but I think it's probably a good thing for your parents to hear as well. Core business is academic performance, and we do as much as we can to improve that academic performance, both inside and outside the classroom. The other aim is for the students to develop independence, being able to organize their lives, be responsible for their own behavior and performance is a really big part of that. Equally big part is developing stronger relationships. We find if students develop strong relationships with their peers and the staff, they perform better, and that's what we want. We do some work on establishing healthy habits, both physical and sort of mental habits. We also will be focusing on helping them become really good leaders. And ultimately, we'd like this current year group, when they leave school in year 12, to have left Coomera Anglican College in a better place to improve the college. So personal development, these are some of the things that we're doing in personal development. There's one lesson every week in personal development. It happens on a Thursday afternoon. The first term, we're looking at leadership development. Next term, we'll be doing study skills, trying to prepare them for the block exams that they'll be sitting. We also have guest speakers coming in to talk about mental health and well-being. and we'll focus on how we can go about building positive relationships and responsible relationships. Right, last 2 slides, I promise. So, tips for students. These are some things that the students can do to help them make a success of Year 11. First thing is be really aware of the assessment calendar. It's available on Hive, and print it out, have it somewhere in your room, highlight your dates, and then from there you can create a study schedule and map backwards from those dates, so you know you've given yourself enough time to be able to complete all the assessments or prepare for all the assessments, because those assessments do have a tendency to sort of congregate towards the end of the term, and that's when students are under pressure. But if they've been really organized and prepared well for it, we should try and lessen the impact there. I recommend using Outlook to set reminders of what needs to be done and when. That helps me keep on track. It should help you keep on track as well. In terms of the daily schedule, half of the time should be spent on homework. You should also be revising the work that you've covered that day or the day before, and then some further pre-reading or just reading. Reading is fantastic on a number of levels, and I highly recommend that we encourage our young ones to do that. And then lastly, and I think probably most importantly, is your teachers are your best resource. You should be asking questions all the time. You should be showing your work to your teacher, asking for feedback. You should be going to all the tutorials you can. Really take advantage of everything we offer here. We have a fantastic dedicated staff, and if you really use those staff to the best of your ability, you will succeed. Tips for parents is check progressive reporting on the Hive and keep track so that you don't get any surprises when it comes to reports. All the assessments will be posted with the marks and feedback on there, so please check that. The other thing is ask to see your child's study schedule so that you can actually see that it's being done. There's some sort of system at play there. Another good thing is just to talk to the students or your children about what they're doing. What are they studying in geography? What are you doing in English? And just get them talking about things can sometimes help. Important one, allow your students to take, your children, sorry I'm confusing it all the time, to take ownership of their learning. It's really important that we don't do the work for them, or we don't allow the teacher to do the heavy lifting. We want them to be able to perform on their own through their own sort of knowledge and skill. And so we have to give them space to be able to do that. Lastly, and most importantly as well, I think if you have any questions, please reach out. Reach out to the subject teacher or the PC teacher or myself or anybody else in staff who you think can help you. We're here and we want to help you. We want to make the most of your time here at the college. We want to see your children succeed and work together with you in order to do that. That's me. Oh no, last one, sorry, I lied. Some key events in Year 11 is the block exams happen at the end of Term 3 in weeks 9 and 10. We have leadership applications. They are due in week 2 of Term 3 as well. So we're going to be going through the process of how to apply, what positions you want to apply for. And then lastly, we have the Year 11 Leadership Camp, which happens in week 4 of Term 4. So those are all sort of the big dates coming up for the Year 11s. That's me, and I'll now invite Mr. Manson up.
Thank you, Mr. Seymour. So he's gone through some really important stuff for your year, day-to-day lead-ups to your assessment, the events that are on this year, some fantastic information for you. Mr. Campbell will follow me and talk about all things QTAC, ATAR, any vet studies you're doing, all that really important stuff. And I will just do some stuff in the middle. So I'll keep it brief. But I wanted to talk a little bit about learning with you. And I wanted to start with a short story which I think summarises where I don't want you to be. So when I was a little bit younger than you, when I was in year 8, I had a friend whose name was Carl. And he came in one morning when we had a maths exam and came up to me, and he was visibly a bit nervous, maybe a touch anxious, maybe regretting the amount of preparation he put in for that particular exam. So I said to Carl, because I'd been studying year 8 maths, and my math colleagues will appreciate this, I thought I was pretty clever, and I said, I've got a way for you to get 100% in this exam, guaranteed. And he asked me, what is it? I said, all you need to do is put down X as every answer, because X can be any number, and the teacher can't mark you wrong. He did it, we regretted it, and I learned a life lesson at that moment about giving advice, which probably doesn't work. But the point being that he wasn't overly prepared, because Carl was the type of person who lived at school for that exam moment, in the moment, without really thinking about it until a couple of days before. So what I want to talk to you about today, which builds a lot on the last couple of slides that Mr. Seymour had up, is about the process of assessment and how it tends to be a focal point for students at your age and at many ages, but it really shouldn't be, because I want to drive home the fact that good learning makes assessment much easier. And so everything that you do should be about good learning. And if you're doing good learning, then you'll find that as you get up to exams or assignments or even drama performances or music performances or anything like that, things are easier. They're not super easy necessarily. They might not be perfect, but they are easier. So I've spent a bit of time, but a bit of the colour to this, trying to come up with a way of showing you the process that I think is really important. This is based on a lot of stuff I've been reading recently. So good learning comes, first of all, pillar 1, in attaining understanding of what you're learning, whatever that is, whatever subject that is, or maybe it's that you're learning leadership at school, or you're working through your PD program. Following that, it's about commitment to long-term memory. So once you've gained that understanding, it needs to get somehow into your long-term memory. So we need to commit there. And then finally, it's about retrieval practice. So when that big day comes, it is easy, or it's easier, because you've got good retrieval practice. So in my mind, and from my experience as a teacher and from what I've been reading, these 3 pillars can really help you get to that crunch time at the end of term, when you've got maybe 3 or 4 assessments coming up pretty quickly. Make that a little bit easier, reduce anxiety, and hopefully improve your success. So I'm just going to elaborate a little bit on each of these, and then I'll hand over to Mr. Campbell. First of all, understanding. There are 3 elements to understanding that I think are really important. I've tried to build this as 3 and 3, so I've cut a couple of things out. But the first one I think is super important, is that you are always seeking clarity. And I want to push the fact here that seeking clarity is not just about asking questions, but it's about asking the right questions, and then it's about committing to knowing whether you now understand. And if you don't, well, then you'll continue to seek clarity until that moment to come. Second is about focus, because we all know we don't necessarily have as much time as we'd like. So when you have the opportunities to learn, or when you have the resources to support you, you should be putting in that focus at that time. And thirdly is the attention to detail. It's about taking some time to make sure that you covered all your bases, you've looked at all those little things that are going on, you've read through your draft feedback and applied it, all that attention to detail stuff. The second pillar is commitment to long-term memory. And this is one that I've spent a bit of time over the last few years reading and working on. Now, we had a bit of an exercise to do with memory as a group of staff at the start of the year, and as we got feedback on that, and as everybody provided feedback, one word came up really often. So I think it's important to tell you that word now, and that was repetition. So as you're learning, sometimes the best way to build deeper understanding and then cement that in your long-term memory is to build in processes of repetition. And that can be a little bit boring, but it's still really important. So I encourage you to think about, and this is backwards mapping, as Mr. Seymour says, where's your assessment? Backwards map that and build in a process of repetition to further enhance your long-term memory. Spacing, which is a form of repetition. So there's a lot of research out there that says spacing that slowly grows will help you to retain information. So you may learn something today, you practice it tonight, you practice it this weekend, and you practice it in 3 weeks. And that is spacing that's slowly growing, it's repetition, and it will build your long-term memory. And lastly, connections. And this one I actually think is maybe the most important, and that is that our brain works with connections. So if you learn a piece of information, it will be in your long-term memory more securely and for longer and easier for you to find if it has good connections with other pieces of information. So to build connections, that's where you might be looking at trying to bring information to other contexts or do different styles of problems or rewrite things in your own words. It builds connections. The last pillar is our retrieval practice, and this is the one that's often missed. So we have plenty of really studious, good studies in this room, and I would say that this one is the one that sometimes people forget about. You may build long-term memory, but in the pressure of a time-based exam, or maybe an assessment where you have to stand in front of the class and present, not having the retrieval practice means you might lose what you're trying to say, or what you're trying to write down. So, retrieval practice. I'm going to repeat myself here. Repetition will help with retrieval practice. Doing that thing over and over again helps you to retrieve and find that information in your long-term memory. Practice, this is, as we get into the senior years, I wouldn't say this necessarily to younger years, but in senior years, as you're hitting those external exams and IA 1, 2 and 3 assessments, do practice ones. Just do practice ones. Sometimes do them with time pressure, get your parents to time you, sometimes don't. Sometimes focus on just multiple choice questions, sometimes only focus on short answer or essay-based questions, but do practice. And lastly, collaborate. And you'll hear this a lot. Get study groups together, share information and ideas. So that collaboration can really help. And I can tell you from personal experience that when I came into math teaching, I was pretty good at maths. But when I sat in a Year 11 class and had to explain differentiation to somebody who didn't understand it at all, I became a lot better at maths through that collaboration. So spend time reframing things, working in groups, solving hard problems together, and you'll build that retrieval practice as well. Anyway, that is all I have for you. More than happy to talk to you about it more if you'd like to. And I'm going to pass over to Mr. Campbell to talk about the head of senior schooling stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manson. Thank you, Mr. Seymour, for all of your wise words. Welcome to everyone. Welcome to 2024. Welcome to Year 11. Welcome to the last stage of the journey. Thank you, Mr. Heaney, for turning off the noise. I'll echo what a couple of speakers before me have said. We thank you for coming out this evening. We appreciate your commitment to your child's journey and these important milestones. This evening, I've got a few things to talk about. Obviously, as Mr. Manson said before he handed over to me, the purpose of me speaking this evening and the purpose of my role in the college is academic. So I need to talk to you about the academic journey that your children are about to embark upon. I like to start by looking at the end. There's a date for you. That's the last day of school for Year 12 students in the class of 2025. All of the adults in the room, like myself, will realise that's going to come around fairly quickly. All of the Year 11s in the room might think that that's an eternity away. That's when it ends for you. That's what comes immediately after, in the second week of December. That's when you'll access your results. Your ATAR, if you're ATAR eligible, and I'll be discussing that in a moment. Your QCE, if you're QCE eligible, and your senior statement, if you make it to the 14th of November, to the last day of term. All of that glory awaits you, and I want to talk to you about how you navigate that journey for the next almost 2 years and navigate it successfully. That's our job, to make sure that happens. Talk to you about the process because things are a little different now. No more is there core and elective subjects, is there electives in one semester and the next, and picking new subjects each year. You've picked your subjects now, and those are your subjects for the rest of the journey. And I want to talk to you a bit about the process of how they arrive at a QCE and an ATAR and how you optimise the result in each of those. I will, as I always do, and I apologise to the parents in the room for whom this is not your oldest child and you've heard a lot of this before. I will run through those usual procedural things that we need to discuss. Now we'll start with a bit of Queensland because there's going to be a bit of this throughout the presentation. You're going to see a few acronyms that seem to be quite distinct to this state. I'll be talking about the Queensland Curriculum and Assessment Authority, referring to it as QCAA. I've already mentioned the QCE, the Queensland Certificate of Education, which I'll explain in more detail in a moment. The QCIA, which doesn't relate to many people in any year, usually one or two at most, but that's the Queensland Certificate of Individual Achievement. I'll talk a bit about QTAC, the Admission Centre, the Queensland Tertiary Admission Centres. There's one of these in each state in Australia. And when you're applying to university, as the vast majority of our students do at the end of the journey, you don't apply directly to the university, you apply to the admissions centre in your state. They handle the offers on behalf of all of the universities. And QTAC is also responsible for calculating your ATAR if you are ATAR eligible, and we'll go through that in a bit more detail in a moment. So if we dip our toes into those dates again, 14th of November, 12th of December next year when your results are released, what can and what do your final results look like? Well, firstly, everyone who's present on the 14th of November 2025 and has therefore completed Year 12 in Queensland will receive a senior certificate. You won't receive it from me, you won't receive it from the college, and you won't receive it on the 14th of November on graduation day. You'll actually receive it on that second date, on the 12th of December, and you'll receive it electronically through a portal called My QCE Student Portal, and you'll need to sign up to that, and I'll be talking to students about that this year. But that's the first thing. Anyone who makes the journey all of the way to the end, they'll receive a senior certificate. The next thing, through Student Portal from QCAA, that we hope students achieve and we work very hard to ensure they achieve, is the QCE. That's the graduating certification in Queensland. It's the sibling of the HSC or the VCE in southern states and other such qualifications internationally. This is your formal recognition of completion of high school. It includes your grades in all of your subjects, both numerical and letter grades, and there's eligibility criteria around it, which I need to discuss with you. As I mentioned earlier, students who can't access the curriculum at an age-appropriate level due to severe cognitive impairment, they go on a different pathway, a Queensland Certificate of Individual Achievement, and those certificates similarly go out at the same time. The third thing that most students at the college will be eligible for is the ATAR. It serves only one purpose, and that's getting you into university, albeit it might be somewhat of a badge of honour around the time you finish Year 12 and start university. I can assure you that that's all it does. So the majority of our students, greater than 90% of our students, will graduate with the senior certificate, the QCE and the ATAR. There's about 10% of candidature each year, and exactly 10 people in this cohort who are ATAR ineligible, and they're ineligible by choice because of their subject pattern. I'll explain a little more in a moment, but those people know they're ATAR ineligible and they've made that choice. So to get into understanding what all of those things mean, there's some subjects on the screen. One's in the two columns on the right in bold font. They're the general subjects. Think of them as the academic subjects. The ones on the left are the applied subjects that often parents and students alike, when they're discussing things with me in my office, they refer to them as the non-ATAR subjects, which, as I'll demonstrate in a moment, is incorrect. because they can and do count to ATAR. They're all ATAR subjects. But the ones on the left, the applied subjects, think of them as the vocational subjects. They're not the academic subjects. And there's some common subjects there that you're familiar with, like from junior secondary and from year 10, like essential English, essential maths, hospitality, industrial tech skills. There'd be a couple there that you're not familiar with, business studies and building and construction, but a number of you have selected those applied subjects. So if we keep in mind to begin with, general subjects and applied subjects are the two groups. The next thing to understand is those general and applied subjects are each made up of 4 units. This is important for understanding QCE eligibility in a moment. There in the right-hand column, you'll see I've also listed VET qualifications. And what I mean by those is certificate and diploma level courses, typically undertaken with an external RTO or registered training organisation, quite often TAFE, but not exclusively TAFE. So a number of students in this cohort would have started a diploma of business with our partner Aurora Training at Robina. They would have started at the beginning of year 10 and they'll finish it at the end of semester 1 this year. We've got a number of students in this cohort who have done what looks like an internal program, the Certificate 2 and 3 of Sport and Recreation, which is run by Mrs. Sam Taylor and is delivered here at the school, but it's actually facilitated by Binnacle Training, which is a large RTO that's in all of the eastern states of Australia and works heavily with schools. But those sorts of things can contribute QCE units as well. Depends on the qualification, but it can be anywhere between 2 and 8 units. So if we start the story there, your general and applied subjects are each worth 4 units. What those 4 units actually look like in practice is Unit 1 and 2 is essentially Year 11. But as you can see, it doesn't take all of Year 11. It in fact only takes the first 3 terms. Unit 1 till about halfway through Term 2, and then Unit 2 until the end of Term 3. Year 12, which is Unit 3 and 4, you can see it commences in Term 4 of this year and ends at the end of Term 3 next year. Might seem a little odd that Year 12 starts in Year 11 in Term 4, but the reason behind that's quite simple. Term 4 of Year 12 is a non-teaching term. It's the external examination term and graduation. And so the teaching and learning for those vital Year 12 units, Unit 3 and 4, from which ATAR is derived, we give them a full semester each. And we run Units 1 and 2 over a term and a half each. And that's pretty much standard across independent schools in Queensland. You'll note there at the bottom your rating, whether you pass or fail a unit in Unit 1 and 2 is determined internally based on your assessment. The 2 gentlemen before me talked quite a bit about assessment. So we determine based on your assessment grades in Unit 1 and 2 whether you pass. The terminology is rating satisfactory or unsatisfactory. Unit 3 and 4 aren't determined by us. We send your grades to the QCAA and they determine that result, including your external exam result, which we don't mark. And those results are not known to us, they're not known to you until that date, the 12th of December next year when they're released. Now, if we see how that all comes together in terms of you qualifying for a QCE, if you remember each of the internal subjects at the college, 4 units. You're all enrolled in 6 subjects. 6 times 4 is 24. So if you pass everything, rate satisfactory in everything, you'll accrue 24 units for QCE. And to be eligible, you need 20. So as you can see, there's some inbuilt flexibility with that 6th subject straight away. And again, all independent schools do this for that reason. If you were enrolled in only 5 subjects and had the ability to accrue 20 QCE units, as soon as you failed 1, you're immediately QCE ineligible. So we have the flexibility of the 6th subject, as all private schools do, to ensure, hopefully, your QCE eligibility. The other thing that you'll need to do is you'll need to rate satisfactory on at least 1 unit of English, and note it's any English, so that's essential English, literature, or English. The same applies for mathematics, And again, any mathematics level, you need to rate satisfactory on one unit. So, for instance, if a student were to start off in a maths level that ultimately was a bit beyond their reach, let's say they started year 11 in mathematical methods, and they didn't pass Unit 1, they didn't rate satisfactory. Ordinarily, that would result in a meeting in my office with the student and the parents to discuss what we could do from this point going forward and what some recommendations are. If the student, as they often do and their parents often do, they want to knuckle down and give math methods a go and continue with math methods, and they go into Unit 2 and they fail that unit again, then when we have that next meeting, I'll point out the fact that they're yet to bank one unit of maths, they're currently QCE ineligible, and we probably should consider the option of moving down to general maths. And I will also point out that Unit 3 and 4, not rated by us, rated by QCAA, I beg your pardon, and the result isn't known until the 12th of December. So at any point along the way, if things do start to get a little wobbly, I'll be discussing it with students, I'll be discussing it with parents if necessary, not in any penal sense, but simply to ensure that you maintain the eligibility for your QCE and QC and ATAR if you're ATAR eligible. And I've mentioned already that point about Unit 3 and 4 not being rated by us but being rated by QCAA and us not knowing the result till 12 December. So if we talk now about the other qualification, ATAR, I'll just remind you, general subjects on the right, academic subjects, applied subjects on the left. Now let's just run quickly through ATAR eligibility. The first thing to understand is none of your academic results in Year 11, in Unit 1 and 2 contribute to ATAR. ATAR is determined only from Unit 3 and 4, Year 12 work. The second thing to understand is you have to pass English in Unit 3 and 4. If you don't, then you're ATAR ineligible immediately. And so, much like the maths example I just gave for QCE, you can imagine we have similar discussions if students are struggling in the incorrect English level, because it impacts not only QCE eligibility but also ATAR eligibility. So whatever English level you're in, you must pass it in Unit 3 and 4. Your results from Unit 3 and 4 only count towards the calculation. The calculation's based on your subject scaled scores, and a lot of people in the room have probably heard some things about scaling. I won't go into it in detail or in fact at all this evening, other than to say when you get to Unit 3 and 4 in a general subject, you'll complete 3 internal assessments and an external exam. The marks from those 4 pieces add together to give a grade out of 100. Before that's used to calculate ATAR, those grades are scaled. We get a report on how they're scaled, but ultimately, before QTAC do the ATAR calculation, they will scale every single subject score for every single student. And they're going to pick your best 5 subjects. This again is another reason why students carry 6 subjects at this college and at all private schools. Again, it's to have that inherent flexibility. We encourage students to work as hard at all 6 subjects. What tends to happen in some cases, and this won't surprise you I'm sure, is for students to think, these are my 5 best subjects and this other one I'm doing isn't going to count, isn't going to get my attention, isn't going to factor into ATAR. And unfortunately, history has shown at some point in the journey for some people, something happens, something unforeseen in one of those 5 pet subjects, and it goes bad. And if they haven't worked diligently and appropriately at that 6th subject, it's not there to do exactly what it needs to do, which is swoop in and save the day. So we're in 6 subjects to ensure QCE eligibility, we're in 6 subjects to maintain the best possible ATAR. But when it comes to ATAR, QTAC will pick your best 5 subjects after they've scaled them. And they can get the best 5 subjects in 3 different ways. They can pick 5 general subjects, they can pick 4 general subjects and 1 applied. So notice we can't call applied subjects non-ATAR subjects because there's an example of one counting for an ATAR calculation. And the third way is 4 general subjects and a certificate 3 or higher. Now, a few points to note there. Firstly, you can't get an ATAR unless you're studying at least 4 general subjects. So I mentioned earlier there are 10 people in the cohort who are ATAR ineligible by choice. Those people are studying 3 general subjects or less. So they've made that decision at subject preferencing, and that's rendered them ATAR ineligible, and they're okay with that. And we'll probably have 1 or 2 students more during year 11 and 12 that will need to change a subject level, usually in English and a maths, to one of the applieds, essential English or maths, and that will take them from 4 general down to 3, and they'll lose ATAR eligibility. And that's quite a serious conversation that we have in each of those cases, and we take them case by case. But be aware there are 3 ways. The top one, 5 general subjects, that's the best ATAR. That's the ATAR that the majority of our students achieve. The other 2 are there so that there's equity across the state, so that students who can't manage the academic load of 5 general subjects but can manage 4, they can still access an ATAR. And the interesting Queenslandism here is, whilst you have to pass English in Unit 3 and 4 to be ATAR eligible, you don't have to count it as one of your 5. And if we look back historically since ATAR began in 2020, it's quite common to see students up in the high 90 range to have the 5 subjects that are counting not include English. Of course, there are plenty of students in that range that do include English, but for students who are studying technical mathematics and science subjects, often English won't count, but they still need to pass it. If they don't, no ATAR. So to close that off, remember, general subjects, if you've got 4 or more of those, you'll be ATAR eligible. That's the majority of you. And the applied subjects on the left are exactly that. They're not non-ATAR subjects. A couple of other things. I mentioned before we've got around about 20 students in this cohort that are in the process of completing the Diploma of Business with Aurora Training. And I do still, in 2024, hear from parents and from students that they've got the version of events a little incorrect here. So for the record, people will tell me, I'm doing a Diploma of Business. I don't need an ATAR because I'm going to use the Diploma of Business to get into university, and it will give me an ATAR of 87. And a little bit of that is correct, but most of it's incorrect. And so hopefully we can clear it up again. The Diploma of Business can be used as an alternate pathway for entry into some, but definitely not all universities. It can be used for a student who's ATAR ineligible and doesn't have an ATAR for some universities, but certainly not all. And it does not give you an ATAR of 87. It will give you a rank score at that particular university. And in the case of Griffith University, that 65% of our graduates from last year have accepted offers from, Griffith University will give you a rank score of 87, and they will treat it as the same as an ATAR of 87. But it isn't an ATAR, so there are some misconceptions there. There's a screenshot from Griffith's page, and whilst the text in the bottom right-hand corner might be a little bit small for you to read, and certainly a little bit too small for me to read on my screen, it says something to the effect of, we have a long-standing tradition of recognising VET qualifications for university entry. Griffith University are very happy to let Certificate 3, Certificate 4, Diploma and Advanced Diploma students in. And they're quite happy to publicise that they will, without a stat test, just on a raw diploma, they will give you a rank score of 87. And that will get you into a lot of degrees at Griffith. They won't permit entry into education or nursing with the diploma, and obviously they won't permit entry into some of the high-end medical or paramedicine degrees, but their ATARs are well above 87 anyway. But Griffith University, very, very happy to let you use the diploma. Always have. Here's another example. This is the University of Queensland. And they'll quite happily tell you you cannot use your diploma in the year after you graduate. They go on to say, we may let you use it sometime in the future. And if you've got experience with corporations using the word may, what they mean there is that they won't let you use it in the future. When they'll let you use it is when you're a mature age student and you won't need it anyway. Interestingly, they'll tell you it's a rank score of 82. But UQ, your diploma won't work. You'll need an ATAR and you'll need very specific subject prerequisites. And we had about almost 20% of our graduates from last year attend UQ or accept an offer from UQ. And to be clear, greater than 90% of our students each year are ATAR eligible, and about 90% of that 90% will go to university the year after graduation or defer an offer. So either way, they'll accept an offer from a university. And they'll go to one of three universities in general, to Griffith, to UQ, or to QUT, which is also in Brisbane. There's a smattering of other universities, but they're the main three. So it's important to understand the diploma works, but it doesn't work universally. A few housekeeping things to finish up that I mentioned earlier. Illness and misadventure. We hope that neither of these things befall you during Year 11 or Year 12, but inevitably they do. The typical scenario is you're sick. You're too sick to come to school, and you're unable to come to school on the day that you have a test. Now, in Year 11 and 12, the process, it's the same as Year 10, but I'll remind you now, you need to lodge an extension request form. The form is on Hive Learn, which is the student LMS. That's not the Hive, it's a different system. It's called Hive Learn, and it's under Student Links. If you apply and if your request is granted, I will give you an extension for an assignment, and the duration of the assessment will be determined by what's on your documentation, and typically that documentation will be a medical certificate. So if the doctor says you're unwell and you're unfit for duty or for school for 3 days and you ask for a 4-week extension, you'll get a 3-day extension because that's what the medical certificate says, and that's all we're permitted to give you. If you're applying for an examination, again, your examination will be rescheduled to another date, and you'll do a different examination called a comparable examination. These rules are not the colleges, these are QCAAs. They're in a rather large handbook called the Policy and Procedures Handbook, and they're the rules that all schools in Queensland have to play by. There's a screenshot of the Hive Learn on the bottom left of the screen, and I've just clicked on student links, and the third link from the bottom is the extension request form. And when I click on that, it looks like that screen on the right. It's straightforward to fill out: your name, the subject, year level, the date that the task was going to be on, the date that you're requesting the extension to, and then most importantly at the bottom, a place for you to attach the supporting documentation. If there is no supporting documentation, it just comes straight back to you declined. Again, the majority of cases, these sorts of things, and we process many hundreds of these a year, up towards 1,000 in a year across 10, 11 and 12. It's quite routine. The bulk of them are medical certificates because they're for illness. The other things that are permitted under the system, if you're representing at state level or higher, so if you're away playing for Queensland or if you're at a national competition, again apply for extension and provide the appropriate documentation, which wouldn't be a flyer saying Australian Swimming Championships. It would be documentation from Swimming Australia with your name on it, clearly pointing out the dates that you're away. And again, if all of that seems pedantic, there's a very good reason why we have to do that. Again, it's not our choice. So you can either attach a medical certificate or an RA medical form. if you know about it in advance, so the example of elite level sporting representation, you would know about that well in advance. So do come and let me know, email me or come and see me in person, sort out the documentation, and again, we do that routinely, it's not problematic. This one is alarming to people if it happens, and frankly in 2024 it happens rarely. But if you haven't made adequate backups of a long-term task, think an assignment here, and on the day that submission is due, some sort of technical hitch happens with your laptop and you've lost the file, or the file's corrupted, or the file's damaged, or the file can't be uploaded, I could keep going on. Unfortunately, we can't grant you any extension. So please, and I'm pleading with you here, ensure that you have adequate backups of all of your work. If you do nothing more than when you've worked on an assignment and it's still not finished and not due for submission, but you finished for that evening, email it to yourself. It'll always be on our email servers, so we'll always be able to get a copy of it. But store extra copies in the cloud, store them on USBs, do the sensible thing. Don't assume that OneDrive and the Microsoft operating system isn't going to let you down. Be more proactive than that. Reasons why all of this has to happen. These are some screenshots from this handbook that I was talking about. And the bit that I've highlighted at the bottom here says that if a school or a college grants an extension to a student, they have to retain supporting documentation. So for example, if a student were absent for an exam and they were sick and they didn't have a medical certificate, but their parent assured me that they were sick, and I went ahead and did what I'm not permitted to do and gave them an extension, and then QCAA says, where's that evidence for that extension? I don't have any evidence. There goes your grade. Not to zero, but to not rated, which means that whole course is gone. So they're the rules of the QCAA. The QCAA, all schools have to play by them. It does, to some people, sound a little extreme. It's really quite reasonable. If you're ill, due to illness, a medical certificate will extend your work. They're also quite clear on things that we're not allowed to provide extension for. And the main one I point out to people each year is, and I'll quote, matters of the student or parent's own choosing, for example, family holidays or sporting events. And let me rush to reassure you, that doesn't mean sporting events where you're away representing Queensland at the Australian Swimming Championships. That's where you've gone to watch Carlton play in the AFL in Melbourne, and you've left on Friday and you've missed a maths test. So if you're away for anything that's of your own choosing, we can't give you an extension. You'll fail that task. The usual thing that happens, and be mindful of this, this happens every year, I have to have this conversation with parents and students, thankfully not very many. You're planning an overseas holiday. The shoulder rates for airfares are a little cheaper than in the holidays. So you book the airfares for the week before school finishes because you're saving quite a bit of money doing it that way. There's that pesky little general maths exam in the last week, but that'll be okay. Unfortunately, it's not okay. And it's a difficult conversation to have with parents. So I'd urge you to be aware of that now. Again, not our rules, the QCAA's rules. Some more happy things to talk about to finish up. Academic misconduct. This one, again, I will talk to students about in coming weeks. But effectively, academic misconduct comes down to presenting work that's not your own, either partially or wholly. The two most common ways we see academic misconduct manifest itself is plagiarism or exceeding word length for long-term tasks. To explain a little more, plagiarism, obviously presenting work that's either not your own, it's somebody else's, or something else's in the case of AI, or you've quoted various sources and you haven't referenced them appropriately. Now, all long-term tasks at the college and at most schools go through plagiarism detection software. We use Turnitin. It's very good at what it does, and it will pick it all up. And so if you've plagiarised, if you've copied something from a website or from another student's piece of work, it'll know and it'll tell us. And what we then have to do is redact the work that's not your own, which effectively means we delete that section of plagiarised work from the report and we grade only what is your work. Now, if you've gone and plagiarised a fair bit of it, that can be quite devastating to your grade. The other one I mentioned is word length. If you have a task in year 11 and 12 and it has a word length of 1,500 words, you must adhere to that. You can't exceed it. There's no playroom, there's no 10% plus or minus. If you were to exceed a word limit, and this has happened in the past, if you've exceeded a word limit in a task in year 12 and the teacher doesn't redact that task back to the word limit, delete, if you've written 2,000 words, they have to delete the last 500 words and only grade what's left. If they don't do that, there's a quality assurance process with QCAA called confirmation, where they take samples of work from all schools across the state. And they don't give us a choice. They tell us what students in what subjects and what assessment tasks, and we have to send them to them. And I promise you, if it's over the word limit, they'll pick it up and they'll redact it and they'll change your grade as a result. And there's nothing we can do about it. So be aware, plagiarism and exceeding word count are two of the more common examples that we see of academic misconduct. And I need to reassure you here, we don't see it very often. So most people manage to get this right. Plagiarism and exceeding word length usually will rear their head if the student hasn't given themselves the appropriate amount of time to work on a task. They've rushed it, they've got it in late, and they haven't had time to edit it appropriately or reference it appropriately. There's another screenshot from the latest version of this handbook that I keep referring to. This is version 5, which was published 2 weeks ago. And it particularly references artificial intelligence because it's 2024 and we live in that age. Do we see at the college plagiarism using AI? Yes. Do we see much of it? No. How do we detect it? The software, Turnitin, has an AI detection tool. What unfortunately do we normally see? We normally see a student has typed the question from the task into ChatGPT, and it's given them back a response. Please write me a 1,500-word essay on the following. And it writes it for you, it takes a second or two, and they go copy-paste. And the software picks it up and it says 100% of this is AI generated, which means 100% of it is plagiarised, which means 100% of it gets redacted and there's nothing left to grade. And I'm being honest, it happens. It happened last year. Since ChatGPT landed, it has happened. It doesn't happen very often, please. Use AI appropriately. Use it to help find sources for a task. Ask it, I have this research question, what websites can you recommend? What readings should I look at? And then use those recommendations, read them and write your own authentic response. But don't ask it to write it for you because that ends one way only, unfortunately. And yes, there are AI scrubbers and cleaners that purport to be able to wash an AI-generated script so that it gets past the detectors, but unfortunately it doesn't because, again, they're all AI, so they get caught in the system. Happy things to finish the evening on, folks. If I go back to the beginning, we've talked about the journey, we've talked about where it ends, those dates in November and December. We've talked about QCE and ATAR eligibility, and we finished on some less happy but important housekeeping matters. Now, if any of those things don't make sense, you'd like further clarity, you've got questions to ask, there's my details. Book a meeting, give me a call, send me an email. By all means, feel free to stay behind to talk to myself or any of the other presenters if you wish. But I'll close by saying, once again, thank you for coming out this evening. We value your attendance, we value your contribution to your child's journey through year 11 and 12. Wish you an enjoyable evening, and thank you again.